Well, I mean, is it better if I stand or sit down?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
No.
I don't think we'll be okay.
Good.
I've always joked, it's like, yeah, from the beginning, so it's like.
Yeah, or even February.
I understand.
You know, exactly. I mean, I'm not going to life. I just don't care. I would say it's really just selling tickets to. I'm going to send you a couple of days. So, yeah. You know, it's funny growing up in Phoenix.
Not something over?
I think it's a speaker. So maybe it goes there.
Man, how's it been? I haven't seen you in like a year.
Yeah.
And then like I played sports and stuff like that. Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, we all, you know, you know, the same team with some of these folks, you know, in high school, or, you know, you did club, whatever. And so.
Yeah. Yeah. I always felt like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's some UA people like, you know, really need to get out more, but I mean, I've had situations where, like, you know, I play out wearing a U of A sweatshirt. I'm in the grocery store.
I don't want to go necessarily.
You know, you're not you're in some situation. I guess I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're ready to roll. Thanks. Good morning and welcome. My name is Andrew Barnes. I'm a professor here in history and the School of Historical, Philosophical, and Religious Studies. That's our official title. And I have the pleasure of being the moderator for this session, which is being sponsored by the Shippers Anti-Racism Committee. And what we're calling this is Democracy from the Ground Up, Community Grassroots Politics and Future Directions. All right. And what I'm hoping to do here very briefly at the start is to introduce the committee, the Anti-Racism Committee. If you're a member of the Anti-Racism Committee, could you put your hand up, please? All right. So we have Leah Surratt, Shamar Al-Hassan, Stan Mervis, sorry to say, Don Fixico, Becky Zane, and Tim. And Alex, sorry, the mask threw me off, guy. And so to briefly describe what we do, the School of Historical, Philosophical, and Religious Studies formed the Anti-Racism Committee in fall 2020, urged on by the ongoing cycle of Black and Brown rebellions that collectively struggled against police violence. Symptomatic manifestation of a violent system of white supremacy that structures everyday life in the United States. In the last few years, the committee has engaged local and state communities by organizing public-facing events to inform and fight the ongoing legacies of slavery settler colonialism, racist law enforcement practices, mass incarceration, and lethal immigrant policies and practices. All right, let me briefly introduce our panel. Patrick Brown, parliamentarian, social media communications chair for NAACP Maricopa County Branch. He has been in the NAACP Maricopa County Branch has been fulfilling the promise of equal rights for all by fighting for and addressing civil rights issues in Maricopa County and throughout Arizona. Elsa Gebreyohanes, Education Ministry, Black Lives Matter, Phoenix Metro, Black Lives Matter, Phoenix Metro is a Black, queer, and Femme-led organization that centers Black people who are the most impacted and marginalized because we believe all Black lives matter. We build solidarities with other colonized folks in the global South to end imperial rule. Okay, Carolina Rodriguez-Greer serves as the Arizona State Director for Mi Familia Vota, a national civic engagement organization that aims to build Latino progressive political power in the United States. He has been a lifelong advocate for educational access, equity, and civic engagement. Born in Seminola, Mexico, Carolina immigrated to the United States at 8 years of age. She is passionate about civic education and ensuring that as many Arizonans are knowledgeable and feel empowered to participate in our democracy. Before joining Mi Familia Vota, Carolina was the founding director of the two trio organizations at ASU University, helping hundreds of first-generation low-income and students with disabilities to enroll and graduate from college. Rabbi Dr. Shlomi Yanklowitz, is the president and dean of the Valley Belt Midrash, the founder of Arizona Jews for Justice, and the author of 23 books on Jewish ethics. Newsweek named Rav Shlomi one of the top 50 rabbis in America, and the Forward named him one of the 50 most influential Jews. Okay. Having listened to me muff that, we're going to invite each of our panelists to say briefly what they would like to sort of say by way of introduction. Rabbi?
Well, thank you very much. And it's great to be with you all. And by way of introduction, I think means about the nature of the work we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. So our most central campaign in Arizona Youth for Justice has to do with welcoming the stranger. And that has to do with refugees and asylum seekers and immigrant rights in general. And that is because the Jewish story is one of seeking refuge historically. That is because the Torah mandate over and over is to protect the ger, the outsider. And that is because we are in a border state at a time of continued rising xenophobia. So that continues to be very central for us. The humanitarian relief work involved in that, the advocacy that's involved there, and the cultural and educational work that goes along with that. Alongside that, in particular, are the worker rights involved with undocumented people. As you know, as many of you know, only 3 or 4 states in the country actually have heat protection laws. And so in Arizona, it can be 115-degree day, and you can work 7 to 7. Without any breaks or water or any protections at all, really. And so there's a number of issues on this front we're working on. Our second major campaign is working with the unsheltered because of their obvious vulnerabilities on many levels. And the only population that's even in many ways more vulnerable than the unsheltered are on native reservations. And that's because they could be more than an hour away from any resources that even unsheltered people down in the zone can get access to at times. And so we have a unique relationship there because there's a lot of hesitancy to work with Christian groups, given the history of proselytizing. But since Jews are anti-proselytizing, we actually push people away when they want to be Jewish to some degree. That we built some trust over there. But largely what we're addressing is anti-hate work. As it relates to xenophobia, to racism, to anti-Semitism, and to figure out how to build bridges And we view that work more as a spiritual revolution than a political revolution, which I'll come back to when I have more time. Carolina.
Good morning, buenos dias. I acknowledge that there's some folks that might be with us virtually, so I want to say hi. I see you, but I don't. But it's so good to be here with you all to have such an important conversation. And I hope that for some of you, this may just be the start of engaging in these conversations. And so very quickly, Mi Familia Vota, we're a national nonpartisan nonprofit organization located in 7 states around the country with the highest Latino populations. And we do civic engagement work to get more communities of color to participate in the civic engagement process, which we know that for hundreds of years has been created to protect certain folks and to keep certain folks out. And so we are here to translate the rule book to bring it to as many people as possible so that nothing about us happens without us at the table. And so we're looking to grow the engagement of people of color. We do most of our work with an equity lens around language, to ensure that everything that we do is put out in Spanish. 99% of our team here in Arizona is bilingual, and most of us are either immigrants or children of immigrants. So we are the people at the center of this, and we do a lot of electoral work. And just in this last year, we registered over 35,000 voters in Arizona, in Pima, Pinal, Yuma, and of course, Maricopa County, because we know that we need more people with access to the ballot box, and we need to protect those rights. And we also do a lot of community education work to ensure that the everyday Arizonan understands the difference between a primary and a general election. This year in particular, folks may not even know that at the municipal level in Pima County and in Maricopa County, our 2 largest counties, are going to be electing a new mayor. They're going to be electing key city council races. And so we're here to bring that information to the community to ensure that our democracy, we know that our democracy works when the most people participate. And so we're glad to be here as part of this conversation, and hopefully, we can engage afterwards to see how we can all collaborate together, because we understand that a lot of the struggles of our brothers and sisters are connected with ours. And if our work and our liberation work is not connected together, we will not succeed. And so happy to be in this space with the panelists as well. So thank you.
Patrick.
Good morning, everybody. Patrick Brown with the Maricopa County NAACP. Want to thank all you guys for able to come out, and all the people who are, logged in at home or at work or somewhere in between. And of course, I've got some really amazing panelists. I feel a little like, I'm like, how did I get up here? But want to talk a little bit about kind of, what the NAACP is up to, what we're doing, kind of break it down to like, I guess our 4 kind of main initiatives right now. If you're not familiar with NAACP, we're one of the oldest civil rights organizations in the United States. A lot of historical, acts and things like that, but kind of talking about the here and now. We're kind of looking at, kind of the intersectionality of a lot of different issues, everything from politics, education, healthcare, economics, and, working to address those inequities and allow where, all parties have a seat at the table. With politics, we're focusing on things like voting rights, like Carolina here, also focusing on people understanding that it's not just the top of the ballot, but it's, of course, every race in between, from governor all the way down to a school board member. We also want to make sure that, we have equitable access to the ballot, and that, how you choose to vote is how you choose to vote, type of thing. Of course, I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little more detail. With healthcare, one of the big issues, especially with communities of color, is that communities of color are not getting the same access to healthcare as everyone. And so, of course, making sure that people understand what the healthcare options are, how to self-advocate in situations, as well as really just helping promote, those next generation of individuals who are going to go into medical medical field, and that kind of shoehorns into education with, equity and access to education. I think, one thing we're all aware is like public education in Arizona is under attack. It's been under attack for a lot of years, and that's of course impacting, equity for whatever choice an individual wants to make, be them going to a university like ASU or, going into the workforce development world. And so we want to make sure that, that equity exists. And of course, our next generation of kids understand what options are. They have a fair chance to get those. Last but not least is, of course, economics. It's definitely, being able to have access to the resources for individuals who want to build their businesses, who want to, get into, whatever profession or, entrepreneurial access that they want and know how to do that, but also creating a network for, all business owners of color who want to be able to be, be able to have access to, of course, revenue and things of that nature. But again, like I said, it's a lot of stuff. I know we're gonna have a really great conversation, so I appreciate being here.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Elsa from Black Lives Matter Phoenix Metro. We're an autonomous chapter here that focus on building some community solutions. And we're an abolitionist organization that don't believe the state can really support us. So we focus on working with people directly impacted by prison and the justice system and criminal justice violence, and build solutions within our community.
Thank you. Okay, we've got two questions that we're going to put on the floor here, and the idea is that we're going to give each of our speakers 3 to 5 minutes to respond to each of the questions, and then with the time remaining after that, we're going to open it up to your questions to them. So we're going to go right straight to both questions, and then we'll open it up to the floor. Right? All right. So, and we'll go in order if you don't mind. Right. So the first question is, what are your thoughts, reflections on the state of Arizona politics and political challenges from the last couple of years, especially as they pertain to community, anti-racist, social justice struggles and movements?
Wow. Wow.
5 minutes.
Okay.
So we have two questions?
Yeah, that was the teaser there. Go ahead, sorry.
Thank you. Well, let me start by saying something about anti-Semitism, and then I'll zoom out beyond there into some broader social phenomena as I see it. In the last few, the last year has skyrocketing anti-Semitism. The ADL is documented through the roof. And let me share just a few things that happened in Arizona in just the last few years. The vandalism of Temple Beth Shalom, the bomb threats to the Valley of the Sun, JCC, the vandalism of the Chabad Center, the vandalism of Tucson's Holocaust History Center, the vandalism of a different Chabad Center, the vandalism of Congregation Chaverim, vandalism of Kol Ami Synagogue, the distribution of anti-Semitic flyers in a Tempe neighborhood. And these might sound like, okay, vandalism is everywhere, but we know what those kinds of things lead to and where they fall out on a spectrum. And if you look at just some of the shootings at synagogues in just the last few years, whether it's the Pittsburgh Tree of Life Synagogue that we're very aware of, and kind of the white supremacist ideology involved there, the Poway Synagogue shooting in San Diego, also a white supremacist, or whether it's the Colleyville, Texas Synagogue Day of Hostage, read by a radical Islamic extremist. And so we see the rise of violent attacks against Jews, and then we see Kanye West, we see Kyrie Irving, we see people who are out there who are saying things that lead to violence. And the Arizona political situation has only fueled that. A number of candidates in this last election who were continuously raising anti-Semitic tropes as it relates to George Soros and others. And so that makes it harder for Jews to feel safe in this state, and it makes it harder for Jews to be a part of many movements and parts of society. And that is a part of course, a broader culture around xenophobia and replacement theory, that, the notion that, and oftentimes in the replacement theory is the suggestion that Jews are at the center of that. In the Pittsburgh shooting, the idea of what he was so upset about, the shooter, was that this synagogue was doing pro-refugee programming. and that the Jews are really, in a conspiracy theory, the ones who are bringing in immigrants, the ones who are supporting refugees, the ones who are funding, like the Soros mantras, the ones who are funding people of color to be more central, and ultimately are the ones who are subversive, because many Jews will look white, but then be aligned with people of color. And so they're the ultimate threat to not only white supremacy, but Christian nationalism. The threats towards Christianity being pervasive in society and led by white supremacists. Now, zooming out, and I know I have just probably another minute or so, but zooming out, I think a big part of what's happening now that puts us at greater threat is a culture of distrust. And it goes across the board on so many different, in so many different areas. But just to point to three, the distrust of democracy, denying elections, the distrust of scientific experts, denying vaccinations, that vaccines are another form of conspiracy, the distrust of the news, that it's all fake news, that media can't be trusted. And when you have a pervasive sense of distrust in society, that can lead down, doubling down on tribalism, and a form of tribalism of an us and them society, of a binary. And that is going to be one of the greatest barriers for us to figure out how to build movements in such a moment of rampant distrust. And what comes alongside that is a study out of the University of Michigan recently that showed the capacity for empathy in America over the last 4 decades has dropped 40%. That means if you're white, it's harder to know what it's like to be a person of color. If you are straight, what it's like to be queer. If you're a citizen, what it's like to be undocumented. If you're rich, what it's like to live in poverty, right? If you are Christian, what it's like to be Muslim or to be Jewish, right? It becomes harder and harder for anyone to know what it's like to be someone different than themselves. And then that further exacerbates this form of tribalism. And then what we see in the social justice space is one issue groups. I fight for my people. And that's also a danger when we don't have a solidarity, we don't have a sense that our work is about a collective beyond the people that are my one people now. And so that emerges out of that culture of distrust that has been thrust upon us. And so I think we're in a very fraught moment. And I think that if we're just reactive to that culture of distrust and fueling it even further to our own gain, I think it opens up just more and more spaces for xenophobia.
I can talk about this for a really long time, but so the question is general thoughts on the state of Arizona and state of politics in our state. And so one of the things that comes to mind for me, and it's not just about this last year in elections, right? I think I oftentimes have to remind folks with a bit of a history lesson that it's like this contentious, like this polarization didn't start with certain candidates, right? This didn't start with the Carrie Lakes, with the Trumps, right? It's been beyond that. And Arizona has unfortunately seen that for a long time. But one of the things that I have seen really harm is the fact that we're not talking about it. We knock on a lot of doors. We have a lot of conversations with folks around the state. And so not just in the Latino community, but the response is like, oh, no, I don't want to talk politics, right? Like, oh, we don't get into that. Let's talk about something happy. Let's talk about something nice, which I'm like, I would love to, right? If there wasn't this like looming thing that's out to literally like make the difference between life or death for some of our folks, right? I would love to. And so I think talking about it, right? Normalizing it and being comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. And the othering, I think, is especially harmful and very dangerous, right? When we accept without question that the reason that I'm not successful financially is because this immigrant came to take my job, right? When I think that, you know, or when other people think, right, like your traditional family, nuclear family of 2.5 kids and 2 dogs, right, is somehow in danger because somebody else wants to love whoever the heck they want to love, right? Like that idea is so dangerous. And so when we don't talk about that, even when it's not your issue, it's a problem because, I think about in this recent election, we have now elected somebody into the role of superintendent of public instruction, who is the author of the ban on ethnic studies program that I am a graduate of in Tucson, Arizona. And so when we look at what's being targeted here in this idea of critical race theory, which is not a thing, we have to pay attention and we have to look at what's being targeted, right? When public education funding is targeted, when books about history, right? If we're not willing to talk about the real history of what happened in this country, and yes, it will make some people uncomfortable, but guess what it will do? It will force people to think, wow, how did something like that ever happen in the United States of America? And the scariest thing, it can also lead to those very same people say, how do I make sure that this never happens again, right? When we don't talk about our own history, when we're not willing to have uncomfortable conversations, right? I oftentimes joke with people like this whole thing about equity and justice, it's not a pizza, right? Like me having full autonomy to my body and what I want to do with it in no way harms what you're able to do, right? Like we're not running out of pizza slices. And so when I think about the state of Arizona politics, I think about the long game here, right? And so it's about having conversations, right? I think about the conversations we're not having because politics has become something so like a family member is like, hi, but it's so dirty. And, like, oh, but no, let's not talk about that, right? And I think about how politics is literally an issue of life or death for some people. And so who gets to skip the politics conversation, right? I think about all the people that need to be in this room and aren't. Maybe they're online, right? But I think about the people that get to pass on the conversation about race, to get to pass because they never have to think about it because their life is so privileged, right? That you get to skip these conversations. And there are other people that are counting on you skipping it and not paying attention. And now they're coming in with these conversations around like, oh my gosh, like if beautiful white kids are now learning about these things that happen, they're going to be so uncomfortable. And I'm just like, dang, like that must be so nice to get to choose your comfort level, right? Some of us like, we don't have to get into it, but like that choice. And so, when I think about the state of Arizona politics, it's a bigger picture, but we need to have some uncomfortable conversations in order to be able to do anything about it. And if you're a person that's like, oh man, like, I don't, I'm going to skip all of that. Think about that, sit with that privilege and ask yourself, what can you do to do away with some of that? What slight discomfort, right? You might be able to experience to ensure that the generations after us don't have to deal with what's happening right now. And so in summary, it's about having tough conversations and it's about looking at what policies are coming down the pipeline that are going to set us back in consciousness for hundreds and hundreds of years if populations don't get to learn what this world actually looks like, because we're negating them the opportunity to do something about it to make sure this never happens again. So.
So to that question, I'm going to kind of start off with, I think everybody in this room and at home, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can Google it. But the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has a couple of years back, declared we are a post-racial society. And I think anybody who's paying attention to society, from a lens, not that individual, knew that was like, yeah, whatever, man. And so as I tie that to Arizona politics, I mean, we're in a really interesting space. We're in an interesting space because while, so Donald Trump is no longer in the White House, the impact of, say, Trumpism, if we want to, give it a phrase, is going to be with us for a while. But the thing is, it's not even necessarily, Trump isn't necessarily a new thing. It's something that has been lying under the surface of American politics for a long time. And many of the people who ran for office, not only in Arizona, but across the country, the reason they were using those tactics was not because, for many of them, I think they were true believers of that, but because they felt that it worked. And if you look at, the numbers and the data and, how you just let's use Arizona, a lot of these elections were a lot closer than they should have been because that rhetoric is resonating with a lot of people, and they may not, have stickers on their car or wear red hats or anything like that, but obviously is resonating. And so that kind of brings us kind of, another old saying of, was the things you're not supposed to talk about in polite company. You're not supposed to talk about politics, you're not supposed to talk about religion, you're not supposed to talk about money. And it's amazing how those three things are what's driving a lot of the challenges in our society that we're not talking about. So I'm in agreement with our other two panelists is that we got to talk, we got to have these conversations, and, we got to recognize, and we have to have, and I'm just gonna be very blunt, so I won't cuss. I don't want to get like a community strike or anything. But but the thing is, we have to have those in white America to understand that it is a privilege not to care about this stuff. It is, to not have to worry about any of these challenges, or either know that if you're treated unfairly, it's just because you're a jerk, not because of the color of your skin or because the person just having a bad day or things like that. And so we need to have those conversations, especially with our own communities, because in many cases, a lot of the folks in our community don't quite have the understanding of the words. They know something's wrong, they know it needs to be fixed, but they don't understand how can we get from my circumstances here to there. We've got to help bridge that gap. When we look at just, one of the big underlying issues when it comes to like things like white supremacy, I think one of the things that really fuels that, it drives the whole concept of white supremacy, this concept of like just a zero sum. And that zero sum is always going to be tied to, who is deserving. And of course, you put the two together, you say, oh, well, the people who live like this, who behave this way, or do these things are deserving of the resources, deserving of the respect, deserving of those things. And that's why you can convince, say, a white male who's living in abject poverty in Mississippi that a billionaire who really would not want to be in the same zip code with them, doesn't have their best interest at heart. And thus that they're playing off of that whole idea of, that entitlement, that sense of privilege, or the desire just to go like, look, my life sucks, but at least I'm not this person, or I'm not that person. And so I think that's another conversation we have to have, because when you look at our history, when you look at, the history of the United States, you will see that everything that's happening today, it's happened before. And the worst part about it is originality has gone out the window. They're not even calling anything new anymore. It's, it's like, it used to be like, this, now they're just recycling stuff they think people don't read. But these are the things we have to have. And then I just want to kind of close with, I guess, one last concept of, and I agree with definitely what you mentioned about kind of worrying, I call it just us, is that, there's a space for intersectionality in this issue, because just looking at the folks here sitting just at this table in this room, I would argue that, at this point, it's almost like, racial or, antisemitism tag, that at any point it could be it. And currently we're all it. And so while we may have different individual focuses on how we want to get from point A to point B, I think what we have to always be mindful for is that, one, we don't get in our own way, but also that we don't do the work for the people who just want to stop all of us. And that's where, I think we have to be very, very careful that, while we can respect maybe differences in how we get, to where we want to go, we're not manipulated, where you just get all of us fighting and scrapping and arguing with ourselves, saying, oh, well, you didn't say this and you didn't do that, and I don't like it because of this, and you like this thing, and you put pineapple on your pizza and all this type of nonsense. That what's happening is then, Tom Horn gets elected, or laws get on the books that curtail our First Amendment rights. We miss the bigger pie because we're fighting over scraps. So that's my thought.
Thank you. Elsa, please.
So I'm gonna ask a question, but y'all don't have to answer it back. When we said defund the police, how did that feel internally? And then how did that feel in 2017, if you remember? How many people knew that in 2017, people here were saying defund the police? We like Arizona, and I grew up and I was born and raised here to refugee parents. And this state has never been one of the states that makes the news for positive things. I think last year's when we learned that Glendale was hosting like a KKK like headquarters. So beyond that, what we aim to do in our amongst our local governments is creating policies that benefit us, where the majority of the budget isn't going to police that are actively targeting all of us, right? And making it hard for us to go out in communities and set up conversations because we're always being surveilled. So some of our biggest challenges is the huge reality that we live in huge state surveillance here, where we're always being monitored, how we're seeing what we're doing. In addition to vigilantes that like to crash events to make sure that we know that we should be scared. And one thing I'll also add is that some of the things that we tried to change locally, as soon as it gets whiffed of it in the state level, there is all of a sudden a new state law that says, oh, you can't limit city police budgets. So those are all things that we think about actively, and some of the challenges that we face in the last few years, and trying to make active changes to better our communities, and also figure out what are some ways that we as a community can come together and build solutions amongst us that match all of our needs, right? We collaborate not just with other Black groups, but largely we live here. This is a majority brown state, and most of our collaborations happen with other brown groups here, and trying to create what works for all of us and how all of us are impacted, not just by state police, but also by ICE that also work with the city of Phoenix police, and how we can find ways to feel safe within ourselves to build better solutions outside of what we are forced onto.
Thank you. Okay, what I have been hearing from all of the panelists is, first, thank you all for your first comments there. What I've been hearing from you is this idea that yes, there is a pretty ugly world out there, but part of the problem is that we're not talking amongst ourselves about how to address this. And so what I would ask you each to sort of speak about for a couple of minutes is what is to be done. Where do we go from here in terms of communal grassroots perspectives and initiatives? And so, sorry, but I'm going to start here with Elsa this time around.
I'm sorry for that. I'm sitting there. So one of the key things I think is important to do is to make sure that we all feel comfortable, like what I like to hear, to be uncomfortable, right? To hear concepts that you may not have heard before, but are willing to learn about, right? Willing to learn, maybe you don't know what abolition means, or prison abolition means, but willing to learn about it and how it impacts folks. Willing to see people that are on the inside in prisons, not as just what people have labeled them, but all the circumstances that led them there, and having deeper conversations and what it means to end up in jail, and how we can build better solutions outside than other than jail. One of the things that we are trying to build is a youth diversion program, so that youth don't end up just mindlessly in juvenile detention centers, but we address the whole reason why youth are ending up in these situations in the first place. But that only happens when we work more collaboratively with one another and are okay with hearing concepts that are not as that may sound very, very drastic and oh, that can't happen here. This is a red state, this is where the KKK lives, we can't do that. But instead think like, there's really nothing they haven't done and that they won't continue to do. So we might as well be open to dreaming beyond.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree. I think, we've got to have uncomfortable conversations. And, in some respects, it might be, people are on different, they're on different, there are different pathways to, I guess, say enlightenment, best way I can put it. And so, one, we have to understand, kind of what's the core issue that, whatever space we're in, who we're talking to. But the whole idea is we got to have those conversations. And I'm thinking about a conversation I had, it was like several years ago, a friend of mine, I don't know if they're watching or not, if they are, I won't name you, so don't worry about it. But a friend of mine, we go back since like high school, and, and I'm a Gen Xer, so it's been a lot of development and just understanding our society, from being, a Gen Xer to now. And, my friend said, just think over the years, he said a lot of very hateful and horrible things about the LGBTQ community. And, a lot of that was just how he was raised. A lot of it was just, how he, just saw the world. And then he got married, he had his first child, time, has marched forward, and his son, came out to him. And all the nasty things he'd ever said, probably was continuing to say, was staring him straight in the face. And, when he called me up, he's telling me about this, and he says, I remembered every nasty thing I'd said. And then I remembered probably every nasty thing I probably said in front of my son. And then he had to reconcile with himself that, what he thought were his sincerely held beliefs didn't reconcile with his beautiful child that he'd raised into a young man. And I told him, like, okay, so now are you ready to have that conversation? Now are you ready to understand that? And I said, the thing is, I told him this in a kind of safe way. I said, look, man, you're comfortable having this conversation with me because, we've known each other for years, but, you didn't want to have this conversation until it was in your household. Now, I appreciate the fact that you want to grow, but now we got to talk about that, because guess what? You're going to have to probably have this uncomfortable conversation with your dad, who I know his dad was the same way, and other family members, because your son has now thought you were safe enough to tell you this stuff. So the reason I'm kind of telling this story is that, this is going to have to be a two-way conversation to what we do next. One, we're going to have uncomfortable conversation with those we are comfortable with. We're also going to have uncomfortable conversations with those who have been in opposition to us, but are showing the signs, and maybe it's time that they evolve a little bit. And so, because we're going to have to get to whatever our best situation is going to take everybody, because the opposition isn't going to magically hop on a rocket ship and go away. We're going to have to figure out a way to live in this country and society together. And so we're going to have to find, where we all get respect, we all are treated fairly, not by one size definition, but by the actual true definition of what it is.
So the question is, where do we go from here? Having worked at the university setting for over a decade, my office actually used to be in Matthews Building. I don't know if that building is still standing. I hope to God they knock it down soon, because that thing is falling apart. But I understand that universities can be a bubble. It can be the most comfortable, warm embrace, right? And I loved it. I loved being in it, right? You go to coffee, you can go on for hours on these philosophical conversations. You get to go to these lectures, and you hear from some of the greatest minds. And it is so darn comfortable. It's a great space. And so when I hear you ask, like, where do we go from here? Get out. Get out of this bubble. Think about the world outside of ASU. Think about the neighborhoods just crossing the street of this place, and find how now that you've been in these conversations, right? The fact that you're here, I hope, right? Nobody's forcing you to be here. But to me, it tells me that you have some sort of curiosity on the topic. Right? You might be that one person in your family that's considered like the one out there, the radical, right? Just because you're like, hey, I literally just want other people to have rights, right? And so the fact that you're here tells me something. And again, right, like having been in your shoes, right, like it is so important that you use your positions of power, right? Whether you're a TA, right? Whether you're an instructor, whether you're a coordinator, whatever your role is at this institution, you have power and you have a platform. And I need you to use that. And if that means that you take a walk outside of this beautiful campus and you start seeing, you start liking some groups online, paying attention to what are they doing? Instead of like, right, I remember like, I also worked at the downtown campus and it was such a nuisance when groups had a demonstration, when groups were doing a protest. It's like, oh my gosh. And I'm just like, is anybody asking why? Is anybody literally thinking, why do these folks feel so compelled to raise their voices, right? And so where do we go from here? I sincerely hope that you listen, that you start paying attention, right? Because there's a lot that's already happening at the grassroots level, right? There are folks doing the work, right? There are folks conspiring, there are folks knocking on doors. I mean, we're doing the thing. But until, and again, right, I'm not here to waste any sort of platform, but until the white person, right, and I understand my own privilege as a white passing immigrant that has since adjusted her status, right, but until the white people, until the intellectuals, right, start asking why and saying like, how can I, right, lend my privilege, my platform in support of what's happening in my community. I mean, I can talk until I turn blue in the face, right? All of us up here can talk until we're blue in the face, but I will still be labeled, right? That hyper radical emotional Latina, right? You have access to spaces and conversations that I will never have access to because people still fear the activist. And I'm just like, dang, I think I'm one of the nicest people around. Like, I don't know why you're so afraid of me. But I'm very aware of that reality. And so where do we go from here? I want you to think about where you go from here. I know what I'm doing, right? I know the work that's cut out for me, but I need you to help us. I need you to have these conversations. I need you to get out of this bubble, right? I'm not saying you need to leave your job here, right? Because I still need you to train the next generation, right? Universities are important spaces for consciousness. And if you haven't seen that these things are under attack, right? It's very hard to regulate what happens, right? At the university level, but our public spaces, our libraries, those are being attacked, and you're next. So where do we go from here? I'd like to put that question back to the audience, like, where are you going from here? And let me know how I can help.
Well, the tragedy of going last is that my 4 reflections have grown to 7 now. But a lot of them are echoes, and so I'll be brief on them because the comments of my co-panelists really resonate. The first of which is picking up on what you shared, the narcissism of small differences. That the person who agitates us most is not the one who thinks so differently from us, but the one who thinks slightly different from us. And also, as a colleague of mine calls the surplus powerlessness, that we tend to punch up. Who do we punch at? Not the one who's the most powerful, but the one who has just slightly more power than my group. And so that makes it almost impossible to build coalitions when our deemed greatest threat is the one who's just one step more powerful. And so what do we do about all this? And so I have a few reflections. One is, I said earlier, I think that it's needed a spiritual revolution, not a political revolution, which is to say, you can get political wins and they get reversed very quickly. You can get judges you want and they're gone. You can have someone in the legislature and they're gone. If you don't have a cultural shift where we live by a higher consciousness that we are interconnected, and that we are all human beings, and truly make a shift, then we will just revert and continue to go back. And so I think we have to work beyond just cheap political wins that will be overturned if they produce more rage. And part of that has to do with proximity, being in proximity, getting more proximate with one another. And Emmanuel Levinas, who is a philosopher I've spent a bit of time with, was dealing with in the mid 20th century, how the Holocaust could happen. And part of what he wants to say over there is that we moved ethics to the abstract, as opposed to just the concrete face of the other person. And that when that ethics is not born from some abstract principles, but merely from this encounter with other human beings. So how do we embrace those encounters and foster those encounters where we become familiar with each other's smells and voices and appearances in ways that make us comfortable and uncomfortable. And it also in a way that doesn't, the goal is not unity. I think unity is such a dangerous idea, but rather as Jonathan Sachs called it, a dignity of difference, that we have a unity that, but within it, a one that respects and embraces diversity. And so, but part of it also has to go back to reading. I mean, reading, you know, if the average American reads 0.6 books a year, you know, I read recently 0.6 books. And it's not just about reading, it's not just about relationships, it's a combination of things of really understanding the phenomena that we're looking at and understanding that we have an intellectual responsibility to look at this stuff. And when I open up my New York Times opinion page each week, I do an experiment of like, why do I want to read those 3 opinion pieces and not those 3, right? And then that we were taught that reading should be fun, right? We're taught that with my young kids right now, that they should read books that they enjoy. Reading should be, you should read books that make you happy. It's like a vacation experience, it's leisure. But I think reading is a responsibility. We should read things that don't just reinforce what we already know. Read things that help us challenge our own thinking and not just confirm our biases, whatever they may be. Okay, my last 2 points here. One is that I think we should hold the paradox of the light and the dark. That is to say, we may have a predisposition that we want to make things sound good. Progress is inevitable. We're moving there. We know people selling progress. Or we also know people selling despair. Things are worse than they've ever been. You're like, wait a minute. Polarization is worse. We had something called the Civil War, right? Polarization is bad. Like, actually, that was right. And so I think we should hold the light and the dark together for 2 reasons. One, because I think it's honest. I think it's honest that we shouldn't have more credibility because we make things sound worse than they are. Right? That someone said, oh, we have 20 years of climate change. No, it's not 20, it's 10. You say democracy's at risk. No, it's at risk, it's broken. Right? The worse we sound things, then the more legitimate we become in a fire up space. I think it's more honest to hold the light and the dark together. But second, I think it's more effective to hold joy with the struggle. To actually show where progress is happening and demonstrate that and look at it and name it. And at the same time, show where there's not progress and hold the struggle. My last point is, in the Jewish tradition, when you put shoes on, from a Kabbalistic perspective, you put you put the right one on, then the left one, and that's because the right represents chesed, love, and the left represents gevura, strength. And how do we build these movements that bring both kind of a gentle love and kindness, but also bring a real force? And that balance feels to me really, really critical, that we don't just bring heat, but we bring light. And we have to do power building and coalition building, and we have to fight, but we also have to figure out how to be gentle with each other in those spaces also. And that feels to me really crucial, that we take care of each other. And it says in the Torah, tzedek tirdo, justice, justice you shall pursue. And the question comes up, why does it say justice twice? And one of the answers I like most is the first justice says fight justice as an ends, but the second justice says fight justice through the means of how you fight as well. That we don't just want a certain ends of what liberation looks like at the end of the tunnel, but actually how we get there also matters. That there's an integrity, there's a kindness to it, in addition to a force.
Okay, thank you all. Can I get a round of applause? So what we're going to do here now is to entertain questions, and we're going to go in alternate fashion. Leah is now going to staff the Zoom and answer questions from there. But I'd like to go toggle. I'd like to have a question from the panel here, the audience here, followed by any questions on Zoom, and then we'll go back and forth. All right. So first question here. Who would like to ask a question? Becky.
So thank you all for being here. It's a lot of the stuff I feel like I've heard and all that. But for your organization specifically, what can we do as community members of this community to help support your organization? Oh, could you repeat the question?
The question is, what can we, as in the anti-racism community, or about,
As an individual,
what can we as individuals do to assist in the program and initiative of each of your organizations? Okay, you can go, we care to go first.
One of the things I think you can definitely, I think all of our organizations have a social media presence. So like there's different times where you'll get call to actions that we put on our page that you can follow along, you can participate in. Sometimes we do like actions like calling the state or calling different public officials. Or you can look into volunteering and seeing what are some things that you can do on the ground with us, whether it's knocking on doors, talking to people in the community, handing out flyers, things like that, or capitalizing on some of the skills that you have that are really great. Like maybe you are really great at like sewing, but you may think that's not helpful, but it actually absolutely is helpful. And you can definitely help with some of your different talents and bring them in. Because it's definitely community-based solutions. It definitely means that you and the community have to come together and help us find those solutions.
Okay.
So the easy answer is, join NAACP. But I'm gonna make it a little bit deeper than that. The thing is to do something. Now, for some, it may be, knocking on doors, calling people, going to, your elected officials, doing all those type of things. But also could be having a conversation with your neighbor, maybe sitting down with that uncle at Thanksgiving and, before he has that third beer and, have some real heart-to-heart conversations to really challenge him, but, not put him in the whole fight or flight type of thing where then he starts talking, and y'all know where I'm going with this. But, and that's really the big thing is that, we can't hope for someone else to do it for us. We can't, say, oh, well, why doesn't BLM do this? Or why doesn't NAACP do this? Or why isn't this organization doing this? It's like, we don't own the monopoly to this work. This is community work. So whether you're wearing a t-shirt or you just go, you know what? This happened in my kid's school. I'm not okay with this. I'm going to do something about it. Cool. If you say, hey, I don't know where to start, call us. If you go like, look, I got this, but I just need a little help. Cool. You're doing something. You're helping, that one little drop into like the big, river of change. Just do something, have those conversations. Don't let this be a great conversation that we're having in this space or a really awesome like Facebook, thread. Do something with it.
Okay.
I can go next. I struggle with this question because like, as an educator, I never had the choice to split myself between doing work in my community and having to have a job to pay the bills. And so there was the getting involved, right? Like, and it was so uncomfortable to see things online. Their organizations would put out a call to action and be like, I don't know anybody there. Show up and see who the people are running. Like they haven't slept for 2 days. Like, yeah, those are the people that you need to go and introduce yourself to. Say like, you did a kick-ass job. How can I help? Or I see you. It's going to be that human connection to identifying what's the role that you have to play here, because there is a role. There absolutely is a role for you. And so I agree, it comes down to those conversations within our own family members, right? Like it might sound like a shock to you, but I have some people that have those stickers on their cars in my own family, because there are still like, a lot of things that we have to work through in communities of color, right? Wanting to be accepted by the white majority is still something a lot of immigrants and people of color aspire to. And so as far as, what I've been saying is find a way to get involved, right? Don't be afraid to send that message, even if it's on a Facebook page. connect with us, right? Like I'm here, happy to connect with anybody, right? We have some other members from our team here as well. There's always work to be done. And maybe in that moment when you reach out, we don't have an event or a call to action just yet, stay in touch, right? I would love to put that burden on you because the folks leading in this work are running around, are doing a lot of the work. And so if somebody didn't get back to you right away, reach out again, right? Don't just say, well, I tried 7 years ago. I sent that one Facebook message and no one got back. Keep at it. The work is not done yet. And so that's what I would say for folks is, yes, have the conversations, connect with other human beings. And yes, liking and sharing that post is important, but that's not the revolution. Like that's not the, like that is a start, but don't let it end there.
Great. Wow, so much to say. I think we should identify what our power is and what our passion is. And in determining where we can make a difference, because there are so many pressing issues on so many levels and so many fights, and we can't, nobody can be in all of them. And we have to ask, where am I uniquely positioned with power? And I really think that, you know, Foucault and others were really right about multi-directional power, that there's not the power and the powerless. I mean, there is one spectrum that looks like that, but everyone holds various types of power. And to figure out what power we hold and what that means for how we can help to lift others up feels really important. And the second is, what's my passion? Because we need to be involved in work that that fills us and doesn't just drain us to sustain it. And so what are those issues I can do? And then on the ones that I know are important, but are not for me because of where my power and passion lie, how can I amplify the voices of others and fuel them with, you know, financially, and raise them up on social media, and even say kind words when you see how exhausted they are, and do all those kinds of things. And so I think it starts really with a self-reflection process of who we are. And then I think in addition to that the self-reflection of our complicity, that all of us are complicit in injustices significantly. I mean, just the fact that I choose to use an iPhone, understanding that there's the slave labor behind it. I mean, it's living in a capitalistic society, in such an interconnected society, it's so deep. And some of those battles we can't win. Sometimes I'm not near a recycling bin, so I throw things in the garbage. Like there's on a daily level, like a dozen things I have to examine when I get home at night. But none of us is free from doing that. Even if we feel like we're in a righteous camp and we're immersed in a social justice struggle, there's so much complexity there that there's still a complicity. And so that reflection is not just my passion and my power and my purpose, but also like, how do I need to change in my own living? Thank you.
Leah, is there a question?
So we don't have any questions online yet. If you're attending this virtually, feel free to enter a question for us.
Right. Well, oh, sorry. John, go ahead.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. So the elephant in the room is not going to go away. The elephant is going to be around for quite a while. And I think the elephant is feeling kind of uncomfortable, kind of confused, kind of afraid. What do we do about the elephant?
You can go first this time.
Oh, well, I want to think about that for a moment.
Well, anybody that could jump in?
I guess living in a zoo. I'd like to just ask for clarification, right? Because maybe it's just me, but I'm in a lot of spaces and there are a lot of elephants. Which
Just
one are
saying
you
we're all
referring to?
Just call this particular white elephant white national.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right.
Good, there it is.
I asked the clarifying question, so I'm not going to talk first.
I guess, who went first last?
You can take a point here.
So, all right, so yeah, you're right. The white supremacist elephant in the room with I'm sorry, I'm gonna make a joke, they'll get me in trouble. But to answer the question, I mean, the thing is that and I guess I'm gonna try and take it from a historical perspective, because that's kind of what, allows me to sleep at night, is this is not something that's going to go away overnight. But if we look at, kind of say human society, or at least let's go to American development for the past 200 and some odd years, it's evolving and changing. And so if we go back really like 50 years, it was socially acceptable to say all sorts of lovely things about us up here. And there was no repercussions at all. Matter of fact, you might get some high fives for it. Now we moved into the euphemism stage. As my grandmother used to say, she grew up with Jim Crow. I inherited James Crow Esquire. And so the thing is that now we've moved into more of the euphemisms. And I call it the gaslighting era, where, well, I'm not being racist, or I'm not being sexist. I'm just, speaking my piece, or however you want to hide it. So that means that if folks are trying to consciously hide it, they know they're doing something wrong. So now what I think is going to be kind of the burden, of this era is moving from just the euphemisms to we start just eliminating these things. Because, I want to go back to something I said earlier about this whole zero-sum thing. It's, for white supremacy, for white nationalism to really grab a hold, it has to lock on to white fear. And often that white fear comes down to what I think every society, every group worries about is resources and access to resources. So if using kind of the stereotypical idea of, Joe the plumber, that's an old one. But, if Joe the plumber feels like, I can't get, work for my plumbing industry. And the complicated answer is, well, you've been voting for dudes who've been going with all these corporate organizations that have pretty much been squeezing you out of this business, and so you're competing against those things, and the economy is really shifting, and you won't get online, and all these type of harder questions that require some self-examination. But it's a whole lot easier to say, oh, well, I see all those people at Home Depot, and that's what they're doing. They're taking our jobs. They're taking all this type of stuff. And so what white nationalism does is it provides that simple, easy answer. It's like, no. It's not macroeconomics. It's not the fact that you won't learn how to use a computer. It's not it's not the fact that your customer base actually wants to book you online and you don't do that type of stuff. It's the Black people, that's the reason. And so I think that the big elephant in the room is we're gonna have to make it smaller. Because right now that elephant, we go back to the point, the elephant was taking up the entire front row. It was loud and proud. It was, doing all this stuff. Now it's just trying to hide in the background. And it's just trying to make us all think that we're the crazy ones. That, oh yeah, it's not because you're Black, it's because you wear glasses. But he wears, those questioning aspects. So, yeah.
If other additions, or should I open it up again?
I think the only thing I'll add is that what's hard about answering that question is that it's not something that we really treat as an elephant, because we can't afford to, because it's actively threatening our movements and it's actively pushing laws. Most of state legislatures abide by white nationalism. So it's not something that we avoid, because we can't actually avoid it. It's a part of all of our planning when we make events, even our events that are not who are protesting, even our our art events, our justice art events. We still have to take into account who's going to show up, how do we protect our peoples, and how do we protect our people without having police around, because police will also target us. So it's not something that we can avoid.
I would just add, let's bring the elephant out, right? Let's name it. Because just the way you asked that question, and all of us were like, well, which one, right? There's so many things people don't want to talk about. Let's start with that, right? It's just name it. Call it white nationalism. Don't skirt around it, especially if you have the privilege of having an identity that doesn't get questioned, right? When you go into a grocery store, or you're lingering around a particular, right? If you have that type of privilege, name it. Name it, because if we have any chance of dismantling white supremacy that has been so embedded into the fabric of this country, that, you know, if you don't have to think about hiding your address online because of the amount of death threats our offices get, that's a damn privilege. If your team doesn't get attacked by people that they pull guns at us when we're walking the streets and questioning why we're in their neighborhood, right? That's white nationalism, and it's accepted. And so we got to name it. Let's stop calling them elephants or giving them cute, safe names to protect them. I don't want to protect white nationalism. I want to destroy it. And so it starts with our language, and we got to keep talking about it, right? We don't say like, oh yeah, those people. No, like that white nationalist, that member of the Oath Keepers, right? And put their names next to it, right? Because you, again, right, like I said, you have access to people, you have access to conversations, you have a platform. Why are we protecting it?
So I mean, looking at the MAGA movement, I mean, I think first is just the problem of those who don't have access to education. And I'm very pro-education. That's not just learning how to read, how to do math, but critical thinking. And the importance, and part of that white nationalist movement is about that lack of education. Second to that, I think, is a culture of greed. A different part of white nationalists, which is the rich white nationalists rather than the poor white nationalists, is going to require major reforms in economic justice around wealth disparities. And those who can just live with a certain level of greed and do anything possible politically to hold on to it. But beyond that, I think that there are those who just live their days full of hate. But I think that's not, like, what's underlying most hate is fear. And we have to understand why this gun obsession is rising alongside this fear that the minorities are coming for us. They're coming for us, so we better get our guns, right? And what are we going to do about that fear? Because if you just yell at fear, it gets more afraid. And so are we just going to yell at that fear, which appears to us just hate that we have to fight? Or are we going to actually address that fear on some level that's going to disarm it?
Add something to that. Don't make the people of color and oppressed identities be the ones who have to talk about this, because white people listen to white people. And like I mentioned earlier, right? Like I'll be labeled the radical, emotional Latina, and you'll add a bunch of things to it, right? To dismiss me. But you have access to other folks. You won't have somebody scream at you and try to discredit you for your visible traits, right? So don't make the people of color be the ones to constantly talk about these things, right? We need more white people to talk about these issues, because that'll get someone talking, right? They'll get thinking like, oh shit, but he looks just like me and he's from where I'm from and he's saying that it's important to protect the rights of those people over there, right? So like, don't do that. It doesn't solve anything, because if, like, I always give the example, like if we have our public education teachers always being the one raising the voice about why it's important that we fund schools in these other neighborhoods, it's easy to dismiss them. But if I have a CEO of a company saying it's important to invest in our companies, if we have right now people in agriculture, people in other sectors that you're like, wow, like we need more of those conversations, and we can't be the ones to lead it all the time.
I would, since we were piggybacking on the thing, we're on fire here. I'm a huge James Baldwin fan. Read all of his stuff. I'm always discovering things to read, but it's something that he said, and I'm gonna kind of dial it back just for the consideration of like YouTube and so, and I think just you guys are live sharing with that. You can always look up the quote, but really what he's getting at too is, and this kind of piggybacks this, is that Black and brown folks did not create white supremacy. We did not create the racial slurs. We did not create this system. We've been fighting against this system in various ways and forms and things like that, just so we can just live. That's really what it comes down to, is that, you know, you look at any community of color, and they just want to go to school, go to work, watch TV, and eat some food and just go about their day. And so the thing is that, you know, the thing that Baldwin raised much more eloquently than I'm going to is, why is it on us to fix something we didn't create? So that's always going to be my challenge to white America, is that you got, you know, this was created by the whole concept of whiteness and all this type of stuff was a creation. So you got to fix it. We are going to fight the good fight. We are going to maybe ask the questions that are uncomfortable and make the statements that, you know, sting a little bit. But we can't fix it because we didn't create it. So that's something that, you know, I think has to always be included in these type of conversations, is that this is not a one-sided relationship. It's not going to be a one-sided solution. It can't be, why can't Black folks do this, that, and the third? Or why can't Latinos do this, that, and the third? It's like, hey, I didn't kidnap my ancestors. You know, I didn't say that they were a third of a person just so I can get a tax break. I didn't say that, you know, my kids shouldn't be in the same space as a white child. I didn't say, hey, here's a great way to fix, you know, the crime. We'll just arrest people for all sorts of little random nonsense. I didn't, you know, say, hey, you know, it'd be a really great idea. Let's make it harder to vote for the people who work a lot and don't have a lot of time to stand in line to cast a ballot, because they're voting, not even voting the wrong way, they're voting.
I think we've got time for one more question. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, we do have a question from online from Mark. Lack of education is a huge problem. What can we do about people who are proud of not being educated, who see this as a virtue?
Okay. Who wants to tackle that one?
I love that one. I'm sorry, I'm not, okay. I said I was going to be nice today, but here's the thing. There's a point where, you know, and I think it's taking, I'm going to make an assumption. I feel comfortable taking the assumption of people who are in attendance and probably watching this at home. We are going to be, in general, peaceful, respectful people. And that means that we often set ourselves to accept a lot from those who we disagree with. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's a line when it comes to just being proud and ignorant, because here's the reality, it's dangerous. You know, we got, like, when I was a high school teacher, I would do a unit on the Holocaust. And typically, you know, everything went fine, you know, lots of emotion, lots of like, wow, I didn't know that, a lot of, you know, understanding. I'd bring in Holocaust survivors to tell their story. And one year I had a parent who was pissed. I can't even say livid, they were pissed. And they said, why are you teaching lies to my child? And so we have the meeting with the principal, and thank goodness the principal had my back. And the level of ignorance that this individual displayed was astounding. Incredible, profound ignorance that they were really proud of. And in my mind, I'm thinking, like, I'm going to be the teacher, I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to, you know, I'm just going to, you know, yeah, I didn't have my coat on that day. And that was going to be my approach, because that's how I thought. But my principal, he didn't have his coffee. He wasn't about that life. And he looked her in the eye. He said, ma'am, I want you to understand that what Mr. Brown is teaching in his class is part of our academic standards. He is very well versed in what he does. And you don't have to take his word for it, because there are chapters and pages and libraries full of history. And we have individuals who were there for this horror and survived it and carry the scars to this day. So if you feel that, you know, your opinion, and this is the best part, your opinion can, you know, override all of that, then in Arizona, you have the option of choosing your educational pathway, because at this school, this is what we teach. And I mean, I was blown away. I didn't have anything to say, but, and I don't know, I hope you know, he's retired. But the point being is that we've got to just stand up to the ignorance, and we got to call it out. And we can't just go, oh, well, you know, they're learning. No, you know, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. And maybe it won't change. And maybe, like I said, we don't necessarily have to meet energy with energy, but we can't just let it go. We can't let it slide.
I would just add that I've seen that like pride in, right, and like even within my own family, right? Like she went to school, she's like them now, right? She thinks she's better than us now. And I don't have an answer, but I just want to say it's more common than you think, because the moment that I can now channel, right? Because there's shame and fear in that pride, right? And we don't know the reason why some folks didn't have the access to certain educational opportunities. So it's gonna take a level of tactfulness and gentleness with our own family members, because I think as long as we continue to define education as formal education, and that's the only valid form of education, then we're not gonna get anywhere, because there's a lot of really bright and amazing people who have a second grade education, and they could spin circles around any of us with what they've had to navigate without understanding the language, without understanding how this system works. And so there is a tactfulness we need to have there with, and my family members included, right? Because there is an otherness that we can create there. And, you going in there with your degrees or whatever it may be, you got to just be gentle with that, because the further we push people to the extremes, the harder it will be to bring them back. And sometimes that is a conversation away. So I would just, that's a really great question. Thank you for asking it. Whoever did it online, it's real, it's in our families. Let's not shy away from that, because there's a lot behind that statement, or when people say that they're very proud of being informally educated or wherever it may be. There's so much more there for someone to get to the point of saying that.
I think one of the things that's important to focus on is centering when, like, someone that focuses on educational programs a lot in BLM and done that for a long time, and counted all kinds of folks that along the way, especially because not many organizations here in Arizona are abolitionists and believe in that, not just like defunding the police, but as a means to getting rid of the police and policing as an institution as a whole. And so you're not going to meet people who agree with that off the top, especially here. And so what our focus really was is creating spaces where people can come not knowing things, and creating methods for people to feel okay with, like, saying, oh, actually, I don't know what this is, can you tell me? Like, one of the things we have in our groups is something called the jargon giraffe, little symbol here. Because sometimes one person will be really invested. They studied the things, they read all of the books, they went to college, did all this stuff. And so they start talking in words that you don't understand. And then you as a person, community member, is like, oh, I don't know what that is. And so you shy away, you don't want to participate. So we try to find ways of, like, well, you even have to say anything, just do this, and then we'll stop and we'll learn together what that word means. And really focusing on creating enough of those spaces where people can come and learn collaboratively. And I'm sure those ignorant people will all, like, they'll exist, of course. But our goals, and especially, here in Phoenix, is to create more collectivism and community building. So if you see that and you're just proud of your ignorance, maybe this is not the community for you. But that doesn't mean that the communities that we build are not going to be stronger with more and more people that are willing to learn, are willing to take that time. One of the coolest things that we did last year was Freedom Schools, where we made, the curriculum was made by the people that wanted to join, found something that they wanted to teach, and then we taught each other. And so that's still gonna be the work that we continue to do so that we can continue to dream beyond what we're forced into.
Thank you for all that. This question really resonates for me. I mean, just looking again back at the Trumpist culture and how much of it was built on a hate for the elite. And the elite kind of being identified partially, not just as politicians, but as intellectuals and a hate for the educated. You've all been duped by those with educations. And those of you who aren't educated, you should be angry at that. And I think that this anti-elite culture is a dangerous one. That prides ignorance. That we're being duped by people, who are in the academies. But I really want to second what you shared here as well around the multiple ways of knowing, how there's so many different ways of knowing. And although I stressed earlier how important I think uncomfortable reading is, that we not overprivilege books in terms of the many ways of knowing and many ways of learning. And epistemologically, meaning on a spectrum of like how we know things, I think one spectrum is this great threat of fundamentalism. We see it in every camp, every religion, every political movement. Those who feel like I have the truth, you don't, and I need to bring my truth to you, right? And that's very dangerous. It lacks humility, it lacks nuance. But the opposite extreme is the radical relativism that says there really is no access to truth. Truth is so complicated that I can't really advocate for any form of moral truth, and which is also incredibly dangerous. And it's kind of masked in a false humility of what do I know anyways? So how do we figure out this middle space of knowing more loosely, but still robustly and fiercely? And that doesn't feel easy to me, how we're going to figure out how to do that. And the last thing I'll say is, in addition to the pride of ignorance, I think there's a pride of vices. The culture of be your true self, right? I mean, I say, oh, you don't want to get me mad, as if I'm proud I'm a person who gets mad, right? Or like, this is just who I am, right? Or proud of my sexism, because like, that's just where I grew up. It's okay to be a racist, because like, this is where I grew up, right? And I think that alongside the pride of ignorance is this pride of self in a way that reaffirms vices. It's okay to be me, be my true self, which includes a whole lot of problematic things as well.
I think we should thank our panelists one last time for a really great session. Lots of food for people to eat.
And I'm sorry, I have to run like for meeting, but
Thank you again.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Great.
Okay.
do you have a card also?
Yeah.